Good morning. It's 10 a.m. once again on March 14th, 2025. Welcome to the cybersecurity briefing. Today, we're going to be discussing yet another uncomfortable topic a bit about why cybersecurity is just so dang hard for small businesses. Now, a lot of times, it comes down to the price because doing proper cybersecurity is not inexpensive if you compare it to what computers and technology and service of all of that was maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Things have become a lot more complicated. Things have become a lot more integrated, and you really can't perform business without your technology anymore. It's just a matter of progression. And the costs for supporting it they go up. We become reliant on something like this, especially with the complexity, it tends to be a little bit more on the expensive side. That's not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about is the uncomfortable part of cybersecurity. You see, cybersecurity is less of an IT problem and more of a business issue. And I know it's kind of a bit of a punch to the gut. But we have to be honest with ourselves and each other if we really want to address this properly. And that's really what we try to do in these cybersecurity briefings is just cut to the chase and get to what the meat is of the problem. And the meat is small business. Again, I say this just about every week. Small businesses are treating their technology as small businesses, and they have to be treating it like their enterprises. And it kind of is going to get old because eventually we're all going to have to do this as small business owners. We're going to have to give the technology a little more acknowledgement, a little more time, a little more effort, a little more budget, a little more everything inside of our business. But really, what it boils down to, and I'm just going to give a couple of examples uh, that hopefully you can relate to. A lot of times when we go in and do assessments, one of the things that we have to do is inventory, right? We have to inventory where the risk is. That's our job in an assessment. That's the whole purpose of doing an assessment is to inventory risk. And some of that has to deal with workflows. How does stuff move through the company? How does money move through the company? Who has access to the things in the company? And time after time after time, in the 50 or less category, I would say 50 seats or less, we typically see that there are large gaps of knowledge within the company. I'm not just saying that the owner doesn't know it, but maybe the department head or the person who day to day operates those things. Um, there's a lot of blind spots as to what the process is. It just gets done. And when you're a small business, it makes sense. When you're a single person, single seat, that makes sense. It just gets done. Uh, and as we build those things out and as we grow our businesses, we start delegating and giving, those jobs to other people who are kind of winging it just like we did in many cases. It's the way the small businesses work. The issue with this is that when we're doing the assessments, as an example, those blind spots, those holes where things just get done, are also places where things can just happen. And if we don't have a formal process around it, we may not identify risks properly, which is bad for an assessment. But more importantly, B, on the planning side of the equation, we may not be properly planning for if an event does happen. We're not going to be able to establish. Many times I equate kind of planning and preparing for to be a cybersecurity and security first company is much like building a ship where you're going to put in bulkheads between areas of the ship. So if one area of the ship gets compromised, if you have some type of breach in the hull, breach word being key there, that doesn't sink the entire ship. Cybersecurity is very much akin to, or cybersecurity planning is very much like this. We are putting in hard stops and checks and balances we'll consider those bulkheads inside the ship so that the whole thing doesn't get exposed, hopefully, in the event of some type of breach. And we have to go by the information that we're given. And, we've got some experience, so we know a lot of the questions to ask. And, that process in and of itself is, I'll be frank, difficult, uh, because it takes a lot longer than it should to get to a lot of the uh, answers that we need. And again, I'm not blaming the business owner. This is how small businesses have done and built and grown into beautiful things. Uh, you can't go into a business, you can't hang that plaque on the door and have everything just ironed out and be super good at everything at day one. That comes with time, experience, growing that team, growing the business. Uh, you know, that day one, you're just happy to get the first dollar in the door. Um, and that kind of has continued. Whereas enterprises are kind of foundationally based around a hierarchy. They are based around workflow. They are based around a couple of things that small businesses kind of avoid. I'm talking to you, small business owner, accountability, uh, and documentation. Um, hello, I'm a small business owner too. I understand these things. So when we look at it at the end of the day, the implementation of cybersecurity, sure, we've got some things, some tools we have to put in place, but largely it's a policy driven exercise. We are creating policies to protect data, to ensure that we're doing things correctly, to kind of establish some baselines for those plans that we're going to be putting in. And that's something that historically small businesses have not done really, really well. Why? Because they're not enterprises. Enterprises have the resources and the redundancy and the experience and accountable individuals inside to have a much better idea of how things flow. Now, don't get me wrong, I've been in enterprises where, one hand does not know what the other is doing. These two do not talk, and it's an absolute disaster slash mess. But within those compartments, we have been able to really kind of figure out uh, their workflow, their policies, what they need to be conscious of, et cetera, much more quickly. And we could equate these as small businesses within an enterprise, right? But we could do that much more quickly, have much more in-depth conversations, just because they're at an enterprise level as opposed to a small business. So it's not that you're doing things wrong, and I want to be clear on that. But it's one of the underpinnings of why cybersecurity is so hard to correctly implement in small businesses because we are asking a big task. When I say we, I mean the community that's demanding that you treat their data and your access to other communities, other businesses' data and their systems um, with the concern that it deserves. And we have to now kind of shift a lot of our thinking, a lot of our being into enterprise level businesses without having the revenue or the support stream available to really do this properly. And that is really one of the things that makes cybersecurity implementation so difficult. It is a business problem. It's an owner problem. It's a community, it's a culture. It's a business culture problem. Establishing a security first mindset has to start with leadership. Now, leadership doesn't mean it's the president of the company. It could be the go-to person. It could be the champion inside the company who leads the effort and get people to do the things that are needed. And the other part of this is it's a people problem, which makes it a business problem, not an IT problem. IT is going to be there as guardrails, right? The IT is going to establish some guardrails to make sure that policies are enforced from a technical perspective. That doesn't mean that people are going to go outside of the IT guardrails to make sure what what they're doing, right? So that's where the culture of the company and that leadership part really helps to establish good security habits, good security etiquette, good security hygiene. If they're doing it and they're making it a live, living, breathing policy, and that's important. Uh, Putting a bunch of stuff in a book that's never going to be looked at is not doing anyone any favors. Oh, I mean, it would help us on the assessment side. Sure, you can pay us to do that. Uh, but I'm probably not going to let you get away with that. I'm going to do a timeout and say, hey, this isn't what it's really about. It's about protecting your business. We don't want to check boxes here. We want to make sure that your business actually survives an attack. It's not going to survive attack if you make policies and you put them on a shelf, because at best, that's a blame game. You're going to point a finger and said, "You, Bobby Sue, didn't do what you were supposed to do, and now we've got breached, and now I'm going to fire you, and you're the reason." No, that's not how that works. You're the owner. You are the responsible parties inside of the company. You are going to need to take responsibility for this because you are responsible. You can't delegate this. And I know I sound like a broken record on this, but it's the truth. You cannot delegate your risk to other parties. You have to accept your risk. Now, if a third party does or doesn't do something that they're supposed to, sure, you can go after them. I use the three-car accident. If you're the car in the middle and you get hit with an uninsured person behind you, excuse me, and you hit a fancy car in front of you, and that person doesn't have insurance, well, your car is the one that did the damage. Same deal. Same deal with third party. If something happened and they're not indemnified, because most cloud services, guess what, are indemnified when you sign the contract, you'd really have to prove some type of really severe gross negligence. Um, you might be able to recoup, but at the end of the day, you had to do your due diligence to make sure that that company was protecting data in a way that is in alignment with your established policy. That's why it's living and breathing. Everything that happens day to day operation, people's thought processes when they open up emails and deal with attachments and do stuff, all of these things have to be in alignment with the company culture of security first mindset. How is that done? That's done through living, breathing policy. That's done through security first leadership. That's how it's done. And this is where many small companies either buy a bag of goods that were mislabeled. We're going to protect you with all this stuff. Well, yeah, they put the guardrails in, but if you're not doing the other part, if you have to be compliant, if you have a CMMC or HIPAA or something like that, the guardrails aren't enough, folks. You need to have living, breathing policy. You need to prove it. Going to do an insurance claim? Great. You need to prove that you are actually enforcing the policies that you have written. And this is the transition that's happened. This is why when we say things have changed, things have changed. Cybercrime is way up. Everything's changed. The variables are different. Cyber criminals don't care if you're small or large. In fact, I think they prefer that you're small. Why? Because they know you're not doing a lot of things right. You haven't built the bulkheads in the ship. So while it might not be a big ship, they can grab the whole thing. And that's where it kind of falls apart, right? That's where we see small businesses just getting clobbered, even ones that put in their cyber protection and they do, what they think is correct. And again, it's a difficult conversation because as a service provider, I want to make sure that you are protected. I want to guarantee that you sleep well at night. But if you're not holding up your end of the bargain, if you're not moving your company towards a security first culture and mindset, we are limited to what we can do. And unfortunately, many of the attacks are still social engineering. They rely on your people making good decisions. They rely on leadership instilling in your people, in your assets, in your liabilities, that they can make the decision to do the right thing. to making sure that we're protecting money inside the business correctly. So, you know, I just want to be totally real with this talk. I know it's more of a heart to heart sharing with you. And I don't want to say a frustration because I get it. We're small business people. We are already stretched incredibly thin. This is not fair. It just isn't. I understand that. But if you do want to be protected, if you do want to have true cybersecurity protection in your company, you have to you have to give this the time and effort. You need to give it the budget that it requires to be a part of your small business. You have to kind of put on the big boy pants and be a little bit more enterprise. Good news is we can help you with that, but we need you to be receptive and understand that. And that's something that I'm very forward with. And we probably scare more people away with it, to be honest. As we're looking at our sales processes, I probably scare more small businesses because they become painfully aware that there's a lot more work for them to do. So there is that. So I'm not seeing any questions. I've been babbling for an extra minute here just to see we're over by a minute. I don't see any questions today. Maybe everyone's enjoying the beautiful weather. Hopefully you are. If you have any questions, please make sure you put them or comments. If you'd like to see something special, if you have a special topic, if you have any suggestions on anything, please take a moment to give us a comment. I would love to hear from you and get your input. This is a community effort, so I'd love to hear what it is that the community needs and what they want so that we can address that and help out in any way that we can. I don't see any more comments coming in. So with that, I'm going to close it out. We'll see you next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. Have a great week. So long.